I'm Stephanie Suen. I am based out of Cincinnati. I'm a caver in this local region here. The presentation that I'm doing today is this wasn't the SPAR practice I was hoping for, and no, I didn't pee on myself. Um, this title refers to the fact that last year in 2022, I took the small party assisted rescue course with the NCRC, and part of my reasoning for going to the SPAR class was, first off, I'm interested in cave rescue, but secondly, I was also going to be on the Silvertip expedition last year in 2022, and I thought that this would be a really good class to take in preparation for that, because there really isn't very much rescue service available in the wilderness area like that. When I took the SPAR class, one of the comments that I had made afterwards was, learned a lot, need a lot of practice. And this really wasn't the SPAR practice I was hoping for. The comment, and no, I didn't pee on myself, was referring to actually the photo in this title slide, where one of the exercises, the patient mentioned to me that, oh no, they were peeing. And I was like really confused by the whole scenario. And later on, when I had to tell that person that I had been injured and Silvertip may not happen for me because of that, the first question they asked me was, but did you pee on yourself? And because I was the patient, and no, I didn't pee on myself when I got injured, but I did end up bleeding on myself. So the presentation is about my particular cave accident and the resulting SPAR rescue that happened. I do want to credit Bo Gurgle, Vincent Guberti, Cody Kisner, Dustin Kisner, and Phil Sullivan. They were my small party, and they were the group that was with me on that day. So a little bit about me. I currently reside in Ohio. I'm originally from New York. I lived about 7 or 8 years in Missouri, 2 or 3 years in Delaware. By day, I'm an engineer for a consumer goods company. There's a huge irony in this because we have a very, very messy hobby as cavers. And ironically, I work in laundry detergents. So that's kind of a fun mix right there. So I started caving in 2019, actually, because of an intern I had at work. And I joined the Greater Cincinnati Grotto that year in 2019 through the Let's Go Caving program. It's an intro to caving program that the Grotto has. And I led a lot of scout trips between 2020 and 2021. I started project caving in 2022. And some of my surveys are listed there. I am in both the Greater Cincinnati Grotto and the Bloomington, Indiana Grotto. So 2 grottos in the Midwest. And some of my passion areas are in cave rescue and sharing what I've learned, and things that you can ask me about, like I'm happy to share and like teach others with, is in SRT and vertical, alpine rigging, cave rescue, and survey and sketch. So to start off, the day that we were going caving, that my rescue happened on, one of our friends, Cody Kisner, was home to Cincinnati that particular week, and we said, hey, we should go do a cave survey. And we had some old notes from a survey that was started, I think, in around 2018 and kind of left behind. And the survey was for a cave in Rockcastle County, Kentucky. And this is just the morning of, we were, crossing this landowner's field. And I remember one of the things was, it was very early spring and there was a lot of birch pollen in the air. So we're all coughing as we're like then bushwhacking through these trees because all the birch pollen was coming up at us. But we had talked to the landowner that morning, and actually they graciously offered to like drive part of our gear over on their little ATV. And then they got us to this field here where we started hiking up the hill. So a little bit about the cave. These are some clippings out of the survey, the map that we had created during this particular trip. What you can kind of see is that there's a entry drop to the cave. So the actual entrance of the cave is a pit. We like to call it about 165 feet, all said, from the point of the tree down into the bottom of the cave. What we had known from the prior survey notes that there was a lead about 30 feet up from the bottom of the cave. And so what we wanted to do was explore this particular lead. And basically we got ourselves up into it, rigged it, and what we found was there was nice horizontal passage. And so we started surveying up in this area. And what was really interesting was that we actually found an additional entrance during that survey. And this is a chimneyable entrance where you can climb out of that. Some of the other views of this cave, you can see here, these lines on cave maps, they don't refer to all these rocks falling. It refers to water. And so this is a stream, sort of waterfall kind of coming down through the pit. So you can see there's two ledges where we definitely had water just dripping down through this area. And then on the plan view, you can kind of see from the entrance pit, there's some slopes. There is a lot of pooled water down here. And then up in the lead, this is what we were surveying that particular day. Here's a view of that entry pit. So looking up, that's the entrance right there. That's Philip right on the rope during his descent into the cave. Very, very pretty pit. And you can see some of these ledges along here. I always like it when the map kind of describes what the pit actually looks like, and our map shows that. And then a little bit of the nature of some of the canyons that are in that horizontal passage area in the cave. So you can see some of these gaps through the passage and kind of what we were looking at in that horizontal passage area. So what happened? As I was surveying, I was in this lower level here, trying to draw this room. And you can see some of these narrow channels that are in between the rock walls. And those are those kind of canyons that we were looking at in those photos earlier. We do not fully know what made something come loose, but basically in the narrow channel here, a rock came clattering down, and we believe it probably ricocheted because it hit me in sort of a weird place in my back. I heard it coming, and I heard a bunch of rocks kind of coming down on me. And so at that point, I started moving as quickly as I could. And I got hit in the back between my left shoulder going across to my bottom right ribs. And from the size of the rock, basically, I did not see which one had hit me, but Bo tells me that he and Vincent had seen it, and what it was between 15 inches by 20 inches by either 5 to 10 inches big. And at that size, if you kind of calculate using the density of limestone, it was anywhere between 150 to 300 pounds of rock that came down on me. And obviously getting hit by that big of a rock, I get taken down to the ground. At that particular point, I just remembered complete silence. And all my breath was knocked out of me. I was down on the ground, face down. I had twisted my left ankle. I remember like a little rock had hit me in the helmet, and my helmet had bottomed out. And when the rest of my party had found me, I basically had my right ankle under another rock. That actually caused a lot of confusion because the first couple people who saw me thought that, oh my God, your right ankle's under this rock. You must also have like a right leg injury. And I had to like yell at everyone, like, stop, stop, because they're all talking and talking. And I was like, no, my right ankle's fine. My left one is the one that's broken right now. And so that's kind of a lesson in also listen to your patient. I was a conscious patient. I do remember it was just complete silence until basically I really struggled to gasp for some air. I think the rest of my party kind of was confused and like not sure what to do at that point, and I kind of was able to eke out like a very faint like help, you know. And at that point they realized that I was still alive. And at that point Vincent yells to me, "Don't move! Don't move!" He was really scared that I had had a spinal injury because they had just seen me get hit in the back with the giant ass rock. Um, and at that point, I kind of was like feeling myself and was just like, okay, okay, I feel all right. And I actually didn't do what Vincent had said. I ended up trying to sit myself up. Later on, I've since then taken a wilderness first responder class, and one of the things that the particular agency that I took, wilderness first responder, explained is that a patient who is conscious and able to move that area of their back isn't necessarily going to like have a traumatic injury to their spinal cord. It is very, very hard to overcome like the body's senses to say that tell you you're injured, you're hurt, like don't move that. And so like if the patient is in a position where they are feeling like, okay, I can move, they are very unlikely to sever their own spinal cord. So what I did was okay, to sit up. At that point, Vincent and Bo were the two closest to me, and they came over and started talking to me. Philip had EMT training, and at some point, he yells to everybody to quiet down, and he started yelling a bunch of questions at me. And he says, "What's today's date? What's your name? What were you doing yesterday?" And at that moment, because I had taken wilderness first aid class prior to this, that's when it sank in. I'm a patient. Um, I am injured. And up until that point, I'm like, you know, in my brain, not necessarily processing all of this, what just happened, and am I okay, and all of this. At the point that he started yelling those questions to me is the point when I started to realize that I was the patient and that this was now a rescue. And so I answered the questions. Those three questions sort of help assess orientation, like whether I'm like cognitively with it. And especially because I had had a rock hit me in the back of the head, with, you know, on my helmet, that was something that did need to be evaluated. At this point, Cody, Dustin, and Philip are on another level inside the cave. And so they're kind of hesitating to move until Bo and Vincent can move me to a safer location. What was interesting about this is that I was bleeding down my face. And I knew that, and you could feel the blood running down my face. And Bo's first reaction to me was, "Oh my God." And I'm like, "Bo, that is not what I need to hear right now." And at that point, because Bo was right there next to me, I had to talk him through sort of taking my helmet off and taking two fingers and feeling around my skull for crepitus. Basically that otter pop feeling, you know, when you have those little icy ice pops and like they're a little slushy, you're trying to look for if there's any crunchy spots in the bone where there shouldn't be crunchy spots. And he goes through that initial evaluation and he feels across my head and stuff. He puts my helmet back on me, but I'm having to talk him through sort of basic evaluation. And then basically at that point, after, you know, we talk through a few things and he, you know, feels around for a few things, he and Vincent help me over to another place under a ledge that basically we know is a little bit more protected. And then we allow Dustin, Cody, and Philip to move down to our level. So at that point, Philip, being the one with the EMT training, comes and does a little bit of a spinal evaluation on me. So 2 fingers, feeling down my spine. He also, took his helmet off, and he's using his zebra light as best as he can to like see if my eyes are dilating, and he's taking notes on some survey paper. And so a couple of things that I've added this slide into this PowerPoint because it is a little bit of information that you can take from a wilderness first aid class, but a little bit discussion on spinal injury management. So for spinal injuries, if there's a mechanism of injury, and in my particular case, there is a mechanism of injury. I had a rock fall on my back. And so in any particular case where you might potentially have a spinal cord injury, you need to treat it as if it is one based on that spinal mechanism of injury. So in my case, I got hit on the back. There's a mechanism of injury, so we need to treat it with care. Spinal assessment's not performed until after the patient assessment is done. So that's sort of that basic, are you oriented? And like all of the basic information of like the things that Philip was doing for me. And then the patient must also, so that's step 1, patient must be sober, conscious, coherent, oriented ×3, which is those 3 questions that Philip was asking me in person, place, and time. Then what's important is that the patient also doesn't have harmful or painful distracting injuries. So some examples of that might be if I had a broken femur, I might be super focused on that broken femur, like, oh no, my bone is sticking out of my leg. And so I might not be a reliable patient because I'm so focused on this other injury that I'm not being reliable when you're asking me questions or if I can feel all of the pain that's also in my back. Then the patient in an ideal scenario is not complaining about any pain in their back. If there was radiating pain, tingling, paralysis, or numbness in any extremities, and then the patient has to have intact sensation and motion in all of their extremities. So that's your fingers and your toes. Tenderness on physical exam. So you're going to go down each spine bone and kind of, draw a circle using your fingers, putting pressure against it to look for if the patient didn't realize that there was pain as you press it. And then without assistance, the patient needs to be able to flex both their hands and their feet and not have any pain or discomfort with that because that's telling whether or not there's any nerve damage on that spine. And then there's also an additional test of like soft versus pointy, basically on like the wrist and the ankle to tell whether or not there's any so that the patient can describe sensation in those extremities. So that's clearing a spine. I just wanted to share some information about that. In my case, I had a very obvious injury to my, spine because I was in pain there. So a little bit about our actual movement out of the cave. So as we had talked about earlier, we were up in a 30-foot lead inside this cave. The picture on the right-hand side, you can see that that upper lead that we were in, and you can see the little rope pad and our ropes hanging down from that. And the picture with the orange rope on the left is showing the main rope coming down the main drop. So we're up in this 30-foot lead, and we have to get back down that 30 foot, and then we're going to eventually have to get up this 165 foot entry drop. So at this point, because I had just literally the weekend before come back from the SPAR class, I had my SPAR kit on me, and I have some pictures of that later in the presentation. And what was super great about my caving party is I feel like we had a lot of skills and knowledge between all of us that we were able to work together and figure out a plan of how we were going to get me back out of this cave. And so some of the challenges that this cave also presented, you can see the bottom of the cave is full of water. Obviously, with our cave temperatures being close to 55 degrees Fahrenheit in Kentucky, it is pretty cold already, but then getting wet is also another factor that could lead to being hypothermic or really, really uncomfortable. And as a semi-mobile patient, I'm not going to be able to like do jumping jacks or anything like that as I'm waiting to get hauled out of the cave. What is really cool, so on the right hand side of this picture of this slide, you can see the picture of me getting hauled out of the cave. There's no rope coming down between my legs. I am very clearly not ascending a rope. I'm getting pulled up out of that drop. So just a very interesting graphic. So as I mentioned earlier, some of our training and being able to work together was really crucial in this particular scenario. The resources that we had, really the biggest thing was knowledge. So under the category of training here, Vincent was actually an exchange student. He's from France originally, and he was studying in Louisville, Kentucky. And I had caved with him multiple times before, but he is a member of Spinal Assessment in France. That's his particular region in the Northern Alps. His specialty is actually deobstruction and explosives. Maybe not necessarily what we needed at this particular scenario, because we don't need more rocks blowing up, right? But he does have a lot of rescue training, and over there in Europe, they do emphasize a lot of SRT and a lot of hull systems as basic caving. And on top of that, he is in the rescue service there. So he has a tremendous amount of knowledge of what to do. Then 3 of us had been through an OCR. I had not been through any NCRC week-longs at this point. COVID caver, right? I had been caving between 2019 through 21. And during the 2020 and 21 periods, NCRC was on hiatus due to COVID. So I hadn't had the opportunity to do a week-long yet, but I had done an OCR. And then I did have the SPAR training. Philip had EMT training, and I could understand what he was getting at because I had been through wilderness first aid. So that training really came into play. And a lot of the discussion that happened was between me and Vincent and I were talking about what do we need to do to get me back out of down this 30-foot drop and back up 165 feet. Amongst the gear that we had, so I had a Petal crevasse kit on me. Vincent, being that he was an exchange student, hadn't expected to go caving very much in the US, so he actually didn't have his own rescue kits with him when he was caving with us. So the crevasse kit that I had turned out to be key during this rescue. What also was a really helpful thing for us was that we had used a 300-foot rope for the 165-foot drop. Part of this was because we weren't quite sure what the rigging configuration was going to look like, so we just decided to bring a really long rope. And Cody had just bought a 300-foot rope because he wanted to go tag caving. And so he needed to get his rope dirty, in his own words. He needed to get his rope dirty before we went down to tag. So that was kind of fun, that we had enough rope for this. And for our 30-foot climb, we had a 150-foot rope. We also had left on the surface a 50-foot practice rope, some webbing, 2 Pro 6 and a pulley, because we just weren't sure if we needed what we needed to go rig this pit when we initially came up to it. What what the other thing that we had as a really good resource was Dustin. Immediately when I was, still down, face down, in the cave, is he left through the new entrance that we had just found, which he chimneyed out of. And he immediately called his aunt, Tammy Otten, who's a former caver, and she knew what to go do immediately. So he calls Tammy, and she starts a call out and gets Thor Barman, who just so happened to be in Florida, but he got 2 local cavers on standby, locally immediately. So we had people coming, or getting ready to come and help us, almost immediately. So what was the thing that we ended up doing? Well, I ended up rappelling the 30-foot pit, or 30-foot drop on my own. Bo stayed up at the top with me. We had Philip go down first, and he kind of gave me a little fireman's belay because we weren't quite sure, how I was going to end up doing. And Bo kind of helped me with getting on rope and like checking me and everything because, I'm not 100% like all there, like I'm kind of frazzled at this point. So Bo's up top with me, just checking me, and then Philip's at the bottom giving me a belay. I rappel down the 30-foot, and the thing I remember the most is I get to the bottom, and Philip's trying to keep me out of the water as much as possible, trying to land me onto like a little sandbar. And I get to standing on that, and I can't pop the bars off of my rack. And I'm like, I just have no arm strength because my back hurts so bad. And I look over to Philip, I'm like, I need help. And he kind of looked at me like, what? You can't pop the bars right now? And he like takes a thumb and just pops the bars off. And I'm like, I know. I feel really weird about this whole thing right now. But like just some of the weirdest kind of experiences for me is that like the things that you're just so used to doing and not being able to do now, you feel really helpless in that particular scenario, and you're just really apologetic with your whole caving team. And so that's one of the things that I really love about caving with that particular group, is that they were just so super understanding and trying to take care of me at this point. So as Philip and Bo are helping me with getting down that 30-foot drop, Vincent actually went and he climbed the 165 pit to get to the top. Dustin and Cody chimney out of the other entrance. And I remember after I get to the bottom of the cave, Dustin comes back in and he de-rigs and takes the 150-foot rope and chimneys it back out from the new entrance that we had just found. So they were up to something on the surface, right? So Vincent had explained to me, I had given him my crevasse kit. We were going to pull off a counterweighted haul system, and that would have been that. This is one of the most efficient ways to get somebody up a long pitch like this. So the particular counterweight that we ended up choosing was a counterweight on ascent. And what you can see here is the diagram of that. The diagram on the right-hand side that's drawn in, crayons, is from our actual rescue and our debrief, because our team got back together and we talked about it afterwards. And so you can see like our 2 main rigging trees. We actually added in the 3rd tree further off to the right, as an extra anchor. We had originally just rigged to the first 2 trees when we did our initial descent. And we used our micro traction, which is part of the Petzl crevasse kit, to create the counterweight system. I'm a relatively small person, so I'm 5'2". Cody he says 5'11". We'll just call him 6 foot. And he's a much stronger human being. So he was my counterweight, and he was basically going to climb the other end of the rope. So in a counterweighted haul system, the rope is basically looped over a pulley with a progress capture. And in the case of a microtraction is a pulley with a progress capture already built in on it. He basically is a weight and a climber when he's on the other side of me. So he's countering my weight. And the additional action of him climbing helps feed that rope over that pulley to pull me up. We knew that the lip of this cave was really, really nasty. So what Dustin was doing when he chimneyed back in and got the other 150-foot rope was he was actually building a 3-to-1 system to piggyback onto our counterweight system and haul me over that lip. So that was kind of crucial because I was not strong enough at that point to crawl back over that lip myself. Now, something really, really crucial with a counterweighted haul system, or the particular one that we chose, because we chose a counterweight on ascent, the patient has progress capture on their side of the pulley, which means that as I'm moving up, I can't just slip back down on the pulley. However, the rescuer, in my case, Cody, doesn't have any progress capture on his side. So if for some reason I like step up on a ledge or something like that, or like I'm trying to get over the lip of the cave and I'm getting out, basically I'm unweighting the system. And if I unweight the system, I'm not countering his weight anymore. And because there's no progress capture on his side, he could end up slipping down. And what would be really bad is I get to the top, I start climbing over that ledge, and then basically I've unweighted the system and he weighs more than me. So he's going to start, the rope's going to feed through the pulley and he's going to go down to the bottom of the cave. And that's not good, right? Because we don't want to lose Cody. So what is crucial in this particular system is that we rigged this additional 50-foot rope that we had on the surface. And we had that one, and that's that second green line off onto the right-hand side. That's his escape line. And so basically, as I get towards the surface, he transferred onto that rope. And that fixed line basically allows him to escape. And if you have a QAS, you can mind it on that side too, as an extra like security. But he transfers over to that so that I don't unweight the system and lose Cody. So basically, he transferred over to it as I got to the lip. So a couple of notes, I added this slide in to discuss a few of the counterweighted hull systems. There's 3 sort of main counterweight hull systems that we frequently use. There's the diminishing loop, the rappelling counterweight, and the climbing counterweight. Now, the diminishing loop is great because I've got some pros and cons. The rescuer and the patient are close together the entire time, and there's no progress capture required. It's just simply a pulley, and like basically the rope is feeding through at the rescuer and the rescuer's end, and they're attached. So they are actually in a loop. The con on this for us was that you do need rope that is double the pitch length at minimum. And that's not something we had. We had 300 foot of rope. It was a 165-foot pit. Our diminishing loop wouldn't have worked because we really wouldn't have had enough rope to go from double the length of our particular pit. So that one was not in our options list because we couldn't pull that one off. Rappelling counterweight is really cool. And actually, there's a pretty famous rescue in Ellison's Cave where the rappelling counterweight was used. It is a super, super fast technique. It's very similar to the climbing counterweight in that it's kind of the same setup. It's a pulley with a progress capture on the patient's side. The difference is that the rescuer is going to rappel on a different line, like the escape line, and basically the patient's counterweight line is attached to that repeller, and basically they're going to rappel down and pull the patient up using their weight pulling it down. This also wasn't necessarily in our menu of things that we could do, because we didn't have a fixed line that was long enough that would have reached to the bottom. And so our fixed line was, a shorty rope at this point that was only long enough for Cody to transfer over onto. So it wasn't like he could have rappelled another line and, counterweighted me up that way. So it was also another thing not in our menu. So we ended up choosing a climbing counterweight. And why this worked really well for us is that my rescuer was at the top of the system. So Cody was up there helping them rig. And then he was able to get onto the line and do the climbing. And this left him in a position that once I got to the surface, he was still near the top as well. And he could help me as I was at the top and finally got to the surface. And obviously, the biggest con in this whole system is that the rescuer must transfer onto the separate line as the patient unweights the system, because there's only progress capture on the patient side. So that is something to kind of think about. So as Cody hauls me up, one thing that I like to mention is that because I had been in SPAR training right before this, I kind of had some experience feeling what it's like to get hauled. And what I like to tell people is that training is not just for rescuers. Training is also for somebody who might be a potential patient. It sort of also teaches you to be a good patient, and what it's going to feel like and what's about to happen. And so in the whole scenario, I really I can't name a point where I was like panicking and didn't know what was going to happen to me. It was more of like shit, I just inconvenienced everybody sort of moment, instead of a oh no, what happens? What am I going to do now? And like there was no real panic because I had seen this before. So that was really, really helpful for me to have gone to training, also for the reason that it kind of kept me calm and kept me kind of able to process what was about to happen to me. The other kind of interesting thing is that Cody, in all of his rush to like help, he's hauling on this rope. And so like he's really strong in the first place, and he outweighs me by quite a bit. So as after the system is rigged, the total time to the surface wasn't very much at all. And all I remember is that from the point that I clipped myself into this haul line, Cody's up there climbing as hard as he can. And he, for reference, at this past year's Kurstorama, won the speed climb of 100 foot in 2 minutes. So he's hauling on this thing as fast as he can. And I have to yell at him several times, Cody, slow down. I am going to puke if you keep going this fast. So it's just an interesting thing knowing that you're going to spin, and there's a little bit of things that are uncomfortable about getting hauled. But he's in this adrenaline rush panic of, oh no, my friend's, hurt. I don't want them to be hurt anymore. We need to get help. And he's out here hauling as fast as he can. But as a patient, being able to communicate back to him, hey, I'm about to go hit this ledge, like slow down, or stop. I need to like push myself off the wall right now. That's also super helpful to have that practice and that experience from having been in training before. So just something to think about as well. So basically at this point, Cody gets me to the top. Dustin, piggybacks the 3-to-1 on, and he gets me over the lip of the cave. Vincent is up there, and he basically grabs me, helps me get over it, and then he stands me up. And the thing I remember the most is he takes my helmet off and he goes, "That's too heavy." And it's kind of like this dad moment. He's got two young kids. Um, and that's that's one of the things that I remember the most is he's like, "That's too heavy." And he smiles at me like, "Woo, we got you out," you know? Um, and at this point, Dustin and Cody, they're about the same height because they're brothers. And they grab me one of my arms over each of their shoulders, and they start carrying me down the hill. And at this point, Vincent, busies himself again, and he's re-rigging the rope into a configuration that, Philip and Bo, who are still at the bottom of the cave, can climb out of the cave. And at this point, so like Dustin and Cody have me down at the bottom of the hill. Cody runs off to go get his car. Dustin's, propping me up. And Cody comes back with his car. And the two of them get me into the car. And Philip comes running down the hill. And he's looking really shocked. And he's got his phone. He's got his phone out. And he's calling out. He's making another call out. And we're like, "Oh no, what's going on?" And he says to us, "There's been another rock fall. Bo is on rope and he's not responding." And so at this point, we're all shocked. And we're not sure if Bo's okay or if he's dead or what's going on at this particular point. And the thing I remember the most is looking at Philip, and I just didn't have any words, and I just start shaking my head like, "No, this can't be happening," and I'm thinking about Bo's wife and everything else going on. And Philip looks completely like shocked, which he has a lot of composure, and I was like very worried at this point because I've never seen him that scared before. So he grabs Dustin, and the two of them run back up the hill. Cody stays focused, and he's like, "I'm gonna get you to the hospital." And so at this point, Cody's driving me to the hospital, and we don't know what's happening. I get to the hospital, and thankfully, sitting in the emergency room, Cody, before we go to the emergency room, actually, Cody and I were on the phone with his aunt Tammy, and we're trying to describe to her what else is going on and what we need to do and stuff. And the funny thing is, Tammy, as a former caver, she's like, "Stephanie's wearing a cave suit, isn't she?" And Cody's like, "Yeah." And she's like, "You need to take that cave suit off of her because they're going to cut that cave suit off of her. And those things are expensive." And I'm like, things that cavers think about, So anyway, we get to the emergency room. Cody helps me out of the cave suit. He helps me out of my boots, especially because, my ankle's all swollen at this point. He gives me, he tries to give me his t-shirt to like wipe the blood off of my face before we go in, so we're not like shocking everybody, but like mud, blood, everything wipes my face. And then I'm wearing Dustin's hot pink Crocs as we go into the emergency room. We're sitting in the emergency room, and Philip actually messages me this photo of Bo. And so Bo, it turns out what happened was during the rock fall, he was just screaming so hard. He had a whole bunch of rocks kind of fall past him. He said the bigger stuff mostly missed him. A couple things fell and like hit his swago on his back, and he kind of curled up under his swago, and that deflected the stuff that did hit him. There was a rock that hit his survey pouch, and it severed the clasp on it. So his survey pouch is like falling, and he grabs it mid-air. And so I joke with Bo all the time. I'm like, "That's a cartographer right there." Because, don't lose the survey notes. But so Bo basically was screaming so hard during the time that all these rocks were coming down on him that by the time that Vincent and Philip were yelling down to him, "Bo, are you okay? Are you okay?" He had no breath left in him. So he's just gasping for air, and he can't respond because he's just so shocked about what's going on. And so he tells me that afterwards, that is the fastest he's ever climbed a pit. The adrenaline rush afterwards just like hit him, and he just flew out of there. So I get this photo from Philip with no words on it. It's just Bo, trying to start coiling rope and stuff. And man, what a relief. Cody and I basically were just super glad to see that our friend was fine. At this point, they clean up. Bo, uh, Dustin, Philip, and Vincent, they pack up all the things and they head back down to the cars. And ironically, on the way down, they bump into the landowner, and the landowner's like, "Did you have a good trip?" And they're like, "Yeah, it was great." and and like, afterwards they had a good laugh about that. But basically they chit chatted with the landowner, and the landowner was like, uh you know really friendly at that point. So good landowner relations with them still. So um now at the hospital, I had a CT scan. This is a picture of the injury. They did find that I have a fracture. I had a fracture on my T4 and T5 vertebrae, so I counted it down. This is T4 and T5. And the particular place that the injury was on the spinous process, which is the little fin that sticks out in the middle of the spine vertebrae of the bone. So it's this little pointy piece right here. And as we were discussing in our little chat group, because I'm there in the little hospital room alone, I'm trying to describe it's on the spinous process. Somebody in our group sent back Stephosaurus, not Stegosaurus. And it's the little fin sticking on the back of the spine bones. And so that's the main result. Afterwards, we did have a debrief. So about a week later, here's a picture from our debrief. There's Cody, Dustin, Vincent in the photo. And over the next couple weeks, having friends who really cared and really kind of knew what was going on was really crucial for me, because this was just this big traumatic event that I didn't quite understand or process properly. I know Philip texted me a day later and was just like, "Hey, that really impacted me more than I thought it did. Are you doing all right?" And for about a week, we weren't really talking about it outside of our group. And Dustin and Cody, we've got what we call Uncle Jerry Brandenburg. He's one of our older cavers in Greater Cincinnati Grotto. He sort of is dad to them, and he somehow figured out something happened. Like, he didn't know what happened, but he had a little bit of a suspicion, like, something's happened. What's wrong, y'all? And he messaged me, and he kind of put all these puzzle pieces together and was like, "Did something happen to you?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he gave me a phone call, and we ended up, talking through it. And just having my cave family who cares a lot is really good. Laura Demarest, she's an NCRC instructor, and she's the grotto chair for Bloomington, Indiana Grotto. She and I are friends, and she's one of the first people I ended up calling and talking to. And she she's been through a few cave accidents herself, and she's really great at coaching about like the psychology of like what's going on and how to process sort of all these feelings and like understanding what just happened. And she's one of the people who really supported me a lot in the first few days after the accident, because I just really didn't know what to do next. And she encouraged me to write an ACA report. So I do have like a short summary of what we did and what happened. That's going to be in the ACA as well. So that's kind of one of the awesome things about the caving community, is just having basically family who you can lean on. And one of the things I'm very, very grateful for is, this wasn't like a big news thing. It's not like a big rescue that ended up in the news where, everybody's got all this publicity and it just becomes like blown out of proportion, and like you don't know how to handle it afterwards. Like, I was very, very lucky in the fact that this was all within our own little team, and we got to deliver the message about our cave rescue without like rumors and other things that kind of happened, you know. So like we got to deliver our own, like, hey, here's what happened, and on our own timing. So that is something that I'm grateful for, and just something to remember is to respect the privacy of the groups who kind of go through this kind of stuff. So out of that particular debrief, a couple of feedback items, because Vincent is a European caver, so he does notice a few differences between American caving and European caving, and the rescue systems between the two. A couple of things he said. Every group should have Palmer furnaces, rescue blankets, pulleys, microtractions. Bolting kits are important for better anchoring and multiple sets of webbing. And he's not giving this as feedback of things that we didn't have. These are things that we did have. But he's saying like, yep, you guys did good. This is great that this is in place. One noted thing is, I think in the US, we have a tendency to encourage every caver to keep a Palmer furnace, which I think is kind of crucial because everybody's going to get cold if you're all kind of sitting out, you know, for a flood or something like that, right? In Europe, he noted that often it's just one trip leader who might have those couple items. So just something to think about is making sure that you have the right supplies, right gear for the type of caving that you're going to be doing. He said rock gardening, super, super important. Obviously, in our particular case, you know, it was a rock fall. I don't think that we didn't do proper rock gardening, but one thing to note is that we were in Virgin Passage. And the other thing is talking to a few other people, I'm like, why would this happen? Why would we have two rock falls in the same cave, and what's going on? From a geology standpoint, something just to note about, you know, like note the geology of the type of cave you're going into. The other kind of thing is, because this was in early spring, we were still going through freeze thaw cycles. Between at night it would freeze, in the morning it would thaw again. And so what likely also happened is there's this freeze thaw cycle kind of loosening rocks and the soil on the top layer of this cave. And what I was told is that there's some likelihood that that was still happening at the particular time of year that we were caving. So that is something to kind of think about as well: the time of year, the type of cave, the type of rock. Just be observant of these things, and try to garden before people go down a pit. And I think, especially within the particular caving group who was with me that day, like, we are so conscious of that now. And we watch out for each other a lot because of that. A couple other things he noted: rigging. So in Europe, obviously, they do a lot of alpine SRT. So they do a lot of rebelays and things like that. So some of their rope techniques, they don't necessarily use a lot of rope pads. And some of the things that he mentioned were rope and tension should not touch rock. Rope pads can sometimes present a hazard in that it might bunch up as you're doing things, or you might not see loose rocks that are under them. So that's something he just wanted us to be conscious of. Rigging to natural points may not always be possible, so good bolting skill is very valuable for a team. When you're rigging multiple sections, not to have rope vertically aligned. So if you're coming down multiple segments, you would offset the ropes, because if somebody's coming down above you, you don't want them to accidentally drop rocks on you. And then the beginning of ending of any rigging needs to have double anchors in case any of the rigging does fail. And one of the things he notes is that in Europe, they are very good about doing rebelays and deviations as initiation to vertical caving. It helps with making sure that everyone's able to do this, helps make sure that we can rig better to avoid obstacles or things like that. So just something that he noted. And then he did say, administratively, there are organized cave rescue groups in Europe, whereas in the US, that's a little rarer to come by. And insurance in the US, we handle our own personal insurance as individual cavers, whereas in Europe, at least where he's from in France, the cave rescue organization does have insurance for things like this. So it's not something that necessarily we're able to change, but he just something that he had noticed. And one thing that he did say to us was he really appreciated all of our cooperation and friendship. He really saw that we had what he calls the caving spirit. It surpasses state boundaries and languages. And he also said that we had really good stress management. So I think that that was the biggest compliment that our team could possibly get, is that we all really worked well together. And nobody had any ego about anything that was going on. So I know that, like, even amongst our team, like, we had some really, really strong human beings in that group. And just knowing that some of the really tough guys in our team kind of stepped back and maybe took a role more as like the medic, or like just an aid for me, really was awesome. And they didn't feel the need to be like, but I can just like, you know, pick her up and put her over there. Like that's, and they didn't, do that. They just kind of stepped back and fell into the role that they needed to. That was so super awesome to see us all working together really, really well. So a little bit of note on what's in my SPAR kit. This is a picture of my SPAR kit as it was during my cave rescue. I have since changed around a few things. I no longer carry a T-block, to be honest. I will carry a different type of ascender, but the T-block really wasn't my favorite because it just bites really hard into the rope. I carry Pro 6, obviously, and I keep those around. But from this photo, you can see from the pulley all the way to the two carabiners, that is a Petzl crevasse kit. And this is the main set of what we ended up using that day, is that we had pulleys, microtraction, a few Pro 6 and things like that. And really the biggest thing that I want folks to kind of understand is like the gadgets and the gizmos are super cool. The knowledge is like really, really the most important part, because knowing how to use this stuff is really what's going to help in a scenario. So like really do go to training, like learn how to use this stuff, because the stuff and the jingle factor is really like fun, but like if you don't know how to use it, it doesn't really help us in the end. And then the note that I have on the right here is that my genie wish in a SPAR situation is more rope, right? I told you about two different types of hull systems that we weren't going to be able to build because we didn't have that amount of rope to go do that. But we had the amount of rope needed to do the system that we did do. And even then we had brought like way more rope than the particular cave needed. So sort of the thing to remember is that hull systems need copious amounts of rope, right? Like you need like this one set of crevasse kit to get me out, but like you needed this excess of rope to make those hull systems work. So one thing to consider is like if you have like a 150-foot pit, maybe bring a 300-foot rope, right? Consider contingency rigging. If there's like you're rigging off a tree or something like that, and as somebody's climbing, maybe they get really tired, you might need to like lower them back down because they're just completely gassed out. So like just think about like it never hurts to bring extra rope. It's just heavy, right? But it builds character to like huck more rope, right? So anyway, that's my philosophy about it. Bring more rope. So a few takeaways: take your safe caving practices seriously. I just don't think that's a joking matter. And it really has paid dividends for me to cave with safe people as well. Be prepared, get training. Training is important, not just for rescuers, but also as a patient. Know when to self-rescue and know when to call out. There's times when, your team may not have all those resources and you may just have to sit there and wait, right? And know how to wait, know how to be patient. And knowing how to be patient isn't just having like enough polymer furnaces for everyone and enough snacks, but it's also knowing how to um, have the right mindset and psychology to be able to do it as well. Um, and know when you need that extra help. The other thing that I want to emphasize is set the ego aside, be kind, and trust your team. And I've put down the logos of, the rescue groups that were kind of involved in my rescue. So the French rescue group and some of the NCRC training that our teams had taken was really crucial for us. In 2022, had a really great rest of the year. So here's a photo collage of a few of the other things that I managed to do in the end of 2022. So still had a lot of fun, healed from the injury. And that was great. And then for Bo, he was the other patient in our scenario. He went on to have a great rest of the year as well. And he did fix his survey pouch. So there's his, that is the survey pouch that got damaged during that. And about 2 weeks later, he managed to go get it repaired, and he wanted to show it off in this particular photo here. I just want to credit our small party. So here's some photos of our grottos. And here's some photos of us. So there's Bo. This is my favorite joke. I'm sorry. Bo's tying a bow line. There's Phil Sullivan doing survey. Vincent. And then there's Dustin Kisner and Cody Kisner. And a few resources for everyone. So NCRC week-long registration actually opened today. I think a few of the levels have filled up, but like if you're interested in that training, like absolutely still get on the wait list. There are people who end up getting into the class off the wait list. One of the things I like to encourage people is like, it's hard sometimes when you're kind of like, can I get through the entry skills and stuff like that? Like, totally sign up, ask people in your grotto for help, practice those skills with people in your grotto. They're gonna be really like open and welcoming to helping you on that kind of stuff. I live in the Midwest, so I'm gonna say, central region of the NCRC. We're doing a lot of stuff with orientation to cave rescue, and we have an in-cave extraction exercise training that we do specifically in central region. So that's kind of fun as well. I took my SPAR class in the northeastern region. I know there's actually one that the lottery is now open for in Menlo, Georgia for March. So absolutely, like, get yourself in the lottery if you're interested in that. I took the Huntsville Cave Rescue Unit training as well early on in my caving career. So they do hauls and lowers and crack and crevice considerations and a little bit of vertical litter movement for. It's like what I would sort of describe it on is like it's like a little bit less than NCRC level 1, a little bit more than OCR from my region. So like I think it's a good kind of stepping stone as well. So I am going to plug them as well. And I took the Wilderness First Aid class with Indiana's DNK Presents group, and it's also taught by 2 cavers, which is super cool. But take a Wilderness First Aid class, take a Wilderness First Responder class. Like that stuff really is great information for knowing how to help somebody when they're injured. And even if you're a patient, like just being able to understand what's happening to you is like super helpful. So, and if you're in a position where funding is a problem, there are NCRC scholarships. So there is a national scholarship. You can check with scholarships at ncrc.info, and some local grottos also provide financial assistance as well. So just my biggest plug out of this is training pays off. Consider doing some cave rescue training. And I think that's everything I had. So thank you guys for giving me a whole bunch of time here to talk about my particular cave rescue. Are there any questions that I can help answer? Cool. I'm getting a bunch of thumbs up. It doesn't sound like there's any questions.
Can I ask one question real
Oh,
quick?
absolutely.
Sure. Hey, so this is Michael Raymond, Woofer and NCRC instructor.
Awesome.
Could you say a little more about your focused spine assessment? It sounded like, you went through the checklist.
Mhm.
You had back pain, but you got cleared though. Could you just say a little more about that?
I don't think I don't think that Philip really felt like I was like cleared, because definitely he like wrote down on his notes that like um I was having like a problem between those two areas. But at that point, I was saying to them, like, I feel like I can move. Like, I feel like I'm in a place where, and I was pretty insistent on it. So I may not have been like the smartest about that at that particular time. I took a work for class in October.
Yep.
And in that particular class, that organization who was teaching it basically stated that their stance on spinal mobility, like spinal movement, is basically if the patient feels like they're able to move, they're very, very unlikely to damage their own spinal cord. So if they're willing to move, basically, I was told that I did not make a really big mistake by trying to do that. So
Okay. Cool. Thank you. Yeah, and if you do get a copy of this presentation, I'll share it with the other NCRC instructors. So thank you.
cool. Yeah, sure. Anybody else? Okay. Okay, cool. Well, thank you guys for listening. I'll hand it back over to John for the remainder of your guys' grotto meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.